Peace talks are due to begin this weekend between the US and Iran, days after a fragile ceasefire took hold. The Australian government is cautious about this, aware it could easily fall apart, but like so many others, reliant on oil passing through the Strait of Hormuz, is hoping these talks succeed. But one of the big unknowns here is whether the other party in this war, Israel, really wants this war to end just yet, particularly with the Iranian regime still in power. The day after Donald Trump announced the ceasefire, Israel conducted its biggest strikes in Lebanon. So I'm keen to better understand just where Israel now stands, because this could hold the key as to whether this war is really coming to an end. I'm David Spears on Ngunnawal Country at Parliament House in Canberra. Welcome to Insiders on Background. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. The day after this ceasefire was announced, Israel launched its biggest strikes so far in this war in Lebanon against Hezbollah. The German Chancellor said the severity with which Israel's waging war could cause the peace process as a whole to fail. I just wonder, is that actually what Israel wants to see, this ceasefire fail?
Not at all. Good morning, good afternoon, whenever this will be transmitted. I thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here on Insiders. Regarding, let's get the facts clear. Israel supports fully the ceasefire. Israel was behind the scenes supporting the ceasefire. We have always been in favor of diplomatic efforts to solve this peacefully. There was, for an extended period of time, there were diplomatic efforts in good faith by Israel, United States, and other key players in order to try and bring Iran to the table and to try and resolve all the issues with Iran, the existential threats that stem out from Iran, to solve them peacefully. Iran just had delay tactics, was evading, was in non-compliance, and therefore we were left with the only option that was open, which was the military option. But we've kept the diplomatic option open all the time. And now, after the military attacks by the joint operation of the United States and Israel, we have now opened, due to the military attacks, we have now opened a new opportunity perhaps, for resolving and getting this all over in a peaceful way.
Because it's been reported that it was Donald Trump who wanted the ceasefire, let Benjamin Netanyahu know at the last minute. You're saying that's not the case, that Israel was actually very keen on having a ceasefire?
Look, there's so many media publications about Israel dragged America and America dragged Israel. They're all false. Everything is done in full coordination and cooperation. Okay. The amount of intimacy and the amount of cooperation behind the scenes between the United States, the superpower of the world, and between Israel is unprecedented, amazing.
So I'll come to what,
so we'll go back to
what has been achieved in this war to date. We'll come to that. But right now, Benjamin Netanyahu's made it clear the strikes in Lebanon will continue. Australia, the UK, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Austria, Norway, Sweden, many others are calling on Israel to stop. So are those calls going to be ignored?
Now, let me explain what the situation is. So as I said, we're in favor of a ceasefire with Iran. We pushed for it and it's come to it. The Hezbollah issue in Lebanon is a separate issue. The problem is that Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is a proxy of Iran, but is also active, is very active independently, has launched more than 6,800 missiles against Israel, missiles, drones, whatever you want against Israel since March the 2nd. We're talking about a month, a little bit more than a month. They've launched more than 6,500 missiles and drones against Israel. They have that capability and they continue to do so. We have more than 1 million inhabitants of our northern part of Israel who are displaced, who have to run to bomb shelters. Their whole life is disrupted. Any country in the world has the right of self-defense in order to try and prevent this.
Does the right of self-defense, though, include what we've seen? Because it's...
I'll relate to that.
The death toll is now nearly at 1,900 in Lebanon. Ambulances have been hit, aid workers, health workers. Is Israel's response to this proportionate?
So let me just finish that item. The issue of Lebanon is therefore separate because the capabilities of Hezbollah still remain. You must understand that this is a separate issue. Iran, we have hit at the capabilities. We have removed the majority of the threats, of the existential threats, which were the nuclear program and the ballistic missiles. So we've moved that. But with Hezbollah, we still have this threat looming and emanating from Lebanon.
So what does that mean?
Lebanon has failed in its...
Will Israel continue until when?
So what we're doing is we're hitting at the Hezbollah. Now, regarding the damage and the casualties, let me relate to that directly. The damage that you see is mainly because we hit at sites of missiles and rockets that they have, which are underground. When you hit a stockpile,
ambulances aren't underground.
Well, we can't go into every detail, right? But if you look at the general picture of what has happened, I know that people have seen pictures, and every loss of any innocent life is tragic. But let me relate to the actual fact on the ground, okay? There's a lot of damage because the hitting that we've done was targeted against the Dakhia and against the center focuses of the Hezbollah. We're very targeted, very pinpointed in our targeting. And when you hit a stockpile of rockets, it creates tremendous damage. But it was a danger to the people of Lebanon initiated by the Hezbollah. Regarding the casualties, one word about that. According to the information that we have in our hands, the vast majority of the casualties are Hezbollah terrorists and operatives. And I'll tell you why. Israel pre-warned the people of the southern part of Lebanon exactly where we're going to strike before we struck. So Israel even undermines its own military operation in order to save human lives. So we told the people to leave. The vast majority of the innocent civilians or uninvolved people left the area. Okay. Those that left remained there and were now amongst the casualties. The vast majority are terrorists of Hezbollah.
Right. Well, to be clear, though, ambulance crew, they're not legitimate targets, are they?
We never target an ambulance or a genuine uninvolved civilian. We never target. Okay. Now, in a war situation, a war zone, especially when people were warned to leave, right, there can be casualties of innocent people, and that's tragic. We have Israelis that have been killed over this period of time that we've been under attack by rockets. We've had many Israelis killed. Innocent civilians can suffer, and it's tragic. But Israel does its utmost to prevent this. And how do we do this? By pre-warning.
To work out what's happened, because the family of Zomi Frankcom, the Australian aid worker killed in Gaza, still waiting to find out the status of an IDF, an Israeli Defence Force investigation into this. You said, what was it, 10 days or so ago at the National Press Club, you'd follow this up. What have you found out?
Let me, this is raised a lot, and let me relate to it directly. Zomi is a tragic incident, and it happens in a war zone. But it's not that there was no investigation. There was an investigation, and an Australian was offered unprecedented access to the information and to the investigation itself. He came to Israel. He wrote up a report. This was not done with many countries that had such incidents, right?
But in a war situation, you said you'd check on the status of it?
Yes, I'm getting to that. In a war situation, you have unfortunate situations, and this was one of them. And Israel expresses sympathy with the family, and it allowed access to the information. The individual that came from Australia wrote up a report. In his report, he wrote two important aspects.
Yes,
one,
we know that.
That was unintentional.
What's the status of that IDF investigation?
You mentioned before that there was no investigation. So I'm just saying that there was a thorough investigation.
No, I did not say that. You said that you would check on the IDF investigation. What is the status of it?
So let me give you what I know up to now, okay? There was a thorough investigation. Investigation came to the finding that the actual attack on the convoy was unintentional. And second, that even the Australian authorized it and approved this finding, the attack was unintentional. Secondly, that there were shots fired from that convoy. So the convoy was perceived by Israel as a threat, and legitimately so, and responded with fire. Now you have a situation where you have a special situation where you have a convoy that there was fire from that convoy. Soldiers reacted, and now you have what you call a judicial process. A judicial process can take many years. I want to remind you that there are Australians that are under investigation for war crimes in Afghanistan, and 10 years have passed. 10 years. And we're talking about an issue 2 years ago where it's a tragic incident. We express our deep sympathy with the family, but judicial processes, especially when you have soldiers who are doing their work.
So there is now a judicial process?
No, I'm saying there is a judicial process. And the judicial process, though, takes time, especially when you're talking about an incident where it was unintentional and there were shots fired from the convoy. So you have to come to it's a very prudent matter of how you relate to the soldiers. And I said this issue has not been shelved. This issue is on the table and it's being investigated.
Let me come back to what's happening in Lebanon then. You've said that these are legitimate Hezbollah targets to be pursued. There will be no let-up. That's correct, is it?
No,
Benjamin
I
Netanyahu
did
has
not
said,
say that.
well, Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he wants to continue this until Hezbollah is disarmed. So will
Yes.
Israel let up at all?
But I'll tell you, there are different ways of reaching the same objective. Just like with Iran, we said we're open for talks in order to reach the objective of removing these existential threats. Also with Lebanon. And Netanyahu himself said yesterday that we're open to re-engaging or opening direct talks with Lebanon in order to talk about the disarming of the Hezbollah and even peace between
But will the
Israel
strikes
and Lebanon.
stop in the meantime? Or not?
The strategic aspects of how you hit at Hezbollah depends on different factors like intelligence information, what you have. Israel has said, and also the United States has confirmed, that Lebanon is not part of the ceasefire. But Israel
So
does
will the
take
strikes
into
continue or not? Just to be clear.
Israel takes in consideration the circumstances.
What does that mean? Will the strikes continue?
We have said that we are not removing, and we're not saying that we'll not strike anything. We will, if we have a strategic target, which is Hezbollah operative, and we know that it's a timely matter, we might strike them. That's a decision of the IDF on the ground and the forces who are operative.
Donald Trump says he's spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu and he's going to low-key it. What does
Yes,
mean?
that was exactly what I was
What
going to
does that
say.
mean?
But we are going to lower the profile in order to try and give a chance, an opportunity for the talks, the direct talks between Israel and Lebanon. You know, we always wanted
So
peace
Donald
with...
Trump asked to scale down, and you will?
It's not just a matter of asking, it's a matter of Israel itself wants to solve these issues in direct talks. I want to tell you something. Israel has wished for peace with Lebanon and with the entire international community since its establishment in 1948.
Okay.
Israel extended, one second, just about Lebanon. Israel extended its hand to Lebanon in peace and friendship many years ago. There was an option of peace with Bashir Jumayel, who was the president of Lebanon. He was assassinated by the radicals, by the Hezbollah types in Lebanon. We have offered our hand in peace with Lebanon many times. The problem is the radicals. If we manage to disarm Hezbollah, we are opening an option, a real option of peace between Israel and Lebanon.
I want to come back to this question of whether Israel really wants a ceasefire now with Iran, because Benjamin Netanyahu said at the start of the war that he wanted to put an end to the threat from the Ayatollah regime in Iran. The regime is still there. Has that central aim been achieved?
A large part of it has. The majority of the threat, of the existential threat of the nuclear program and the ballistic missiles have been taken out. More than 80 or 90% of the nuclear resources that they had, the production systems have been taken out.
That was
so in a
prior to
large
the war,
part,
wasn't it?
No, in this recent
So what's
operation.
happened during the last 5 weeks in relation to that uranium stockpile?
Now, there is also enriched uranium, which is part of the understanding, and we say again, all we need is to attain the objectives. If we attain the objectives through peaceful resolution and talks, that's fine.
But is
if
the
we
uranium
can't,
still there?
there is enriched uranium which needs to be taken out.
So that needs to be
It needs to be addressed, but it doesn't have to be addressed through military operation.
Right.
That's what we're saying. If we can attain the objectives through peaceful discussions, we're fine with that. The problem is that we can't allow the discussions to hijack the situation. In the end, you don't attain the objectives. You know, there were agreements like the JCPOA with Iran, which did not attain the objective. It just paved the way for their nuclear ability instead of removing.
So if
Here
Iran-
we want to remove the nuclear capability.
So if Iran doesn't hand that over, the fighting will resume?
Yes, it's a ceasefire in order to give a chance for peaceful talks and attain the objectives through peaceful talks. If we don't attain the objectives through peaceful talks, sadly, we may have to go back to a military campaign.
Do you have any sense Iran is willing to hand that over? Because everything
That's
they're
part of the
saying
negotiation.
suggests they're not.
In their 10 points that they gave, it was ludicrous what they put forward on the table. It was clear that it's non-starter, and if you heard the spokesperson of the White House, you heard exactly what White House thought about their idea. Our idea is very simple. Remove the existential threats, stop their support of the proxies. Removing existential threats means also removing the enriched uranium, which is a potential of nuclear warfare against Israel in the West. We remove the threats, and we're fine with that.
And did Israel misjudge Iran's capacity to choke off the Strait of Hormuz and find a new point of leverage over the United States?
Look, Iran has had this capability for many years. It started even before this military campaign, this joint military campaign by the United States and Israel. May I remind your listeners that there was shooting and launching of rockets by Iranian proxies along the straits even before. So it's not as a result. We must understand that a menace or a rogue state like Iran and its proxies, which are terrorist entities and these type of organizations, there are no checks and balances.
So you
they
knew
can do
Iran
whatever
could
they
do
want,
this.
whenever they
You
want.
knew Iran could do this in the Strait.
The capability was there, but we didn't think that they would shoot out at 12 different countries in the region, which they did. They enhanced
You
the
honestly
battle,
didn't think they'd do this?
not against their friends. They even launched rockets against their friends like Oman and Qatar, countries that don't have any diplomatic relations with Israel,
So
which
Israel-
have given them support. This just shows what a rogue state this is.
So Israel was surprised by Iran's response to this war.
By the scope of the response,
And its
not the
ability
fact
to-
that they responded.
To choke off the Strait of Hormuz was a surprise.
That I wouldn't say it's a surprise, because you should never be surprised by a rogue entity like Iran.
So what was
But
it? Did you
Iran-
know they would do this?
But we would assume that Iran would not affect the global community and the supply chains of energy for the entire world because of their predicament.
So you didn't assume
That is
they
the
would do
problem
this.
of a rogue state.
You didn't think they'd do this.
We assumed and hoped that they wouldn't.
So you were surprised.
It was
they
not
did
part
this.
of our planning.
This was a surprise.
It was not part of our planning. Yes.
Why not?
What do you mean? I said it's not, nothing's a surprise. When you talk
Well, okay,
about
so
an
it was
entity,
not part of your plan that Iran
No.
would do this, and it's turned out to be their single most effective response. Was Israel unprepared for this?
you do plan for all scenarios. You
But
have
not
to
this
always
one.
plan for the worst scenario, right? Iran could have done worse.
You did not plan,
You
you
know,
said, for them to
before-
close the Strait of Hormuz.
We try to plan for all scenarios, and you must take into consideration even the worst scenarios. You know, there was some thoughts that perhaps Iran even has nuclear warfare already, because you never know.
But coming back
But
to this point,
just-
do you think
I'll
many
just
would be
finish my point.
surprised,
One
given
second.
the global economic impact, that Israel did not plan for Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz?
It's not our plan; it's their doing. We don't plan what an enemy would do. What
Really?
we do
You
is
don't
we
plan
take.
what an enemy would do ahead of going to war?
No,
Really?
I said again. Allow me to finish my sentence.
Okay.
You do take into consideration all scenarios, including the worst scenarios, right? You hope that they won't happen, where it's not us to plan for Iran what they do. We take into consideration all the scenarios. You hope and you pray that an entity like Iran, even a rogue entity like Iran, will not do what is worst for them and for the international community. If they decide to choose that path, just like, Hezbollah, we called upon Hezbollah not to launch, not to attack. They would not have been brought into the conflict at all, but they decided to attack.
Okay.
They bear responsibility for their decisions.
Here we are with the Iranian regime still there. Its ability to close off the Strait of Hormuz is there for all to see, something you've acknowledged wasn't in the planning of Israel. Is it any
Again, it's
wonder...
not our planning what Iran will do. We can
Okay,
brace
but it's
ourselves
happened.
for the options, but it's not our planning.
So Israeli politicians on both the left and the right of Benjamin Netanyahu are now highly critical of where this has landed. Naftali Bennett says the public in Israel was sold illusions and worries that Iran will now be more vengeful and determined. Yair Lapid says there's never been such a diplomatic disaster in all of our history. Did Benjamin Netanyahu overpromise and underdeliver here?
I want to tell you that Israel is a robust democracy and we're very proud of it. You can have every opinion from far left to far right in the Israeli scene, which you don't have in any other country in the Middle East. This demonstrates and emphasizes how Israel is the one and only democracy in the Middle East, the one and only country that preserves the rights of all religions, freedom of all religions, the freedom of the individual. And you see this in the opposition. You have where this is the only country in the Middle East where the judicial system can bring an indictment against the prime minister, and the prime minister is toppled by elections and is voted in by free, genuine elections.
Back to the point.
So I'm just saying that's the character of the country of Israel. Now you have opposition in Israel. Opposition in its characteristic and its nature is always looking to criticize. That's fine. That's part of our democratic system. We will come to elections. When we come to elections, the elections are this year. We'll come to elections and the people will decide whether Bennett is prime minister or whether Lapid is prime minister or Netanyahu. At the moment, the polls show that Netanyahu still has a large support in the public of Israel. That's not my business. I'm not in politics. I'm just representing the state of Israel, whoever is the leader of the state of Israel. And I'm just saying that if Bennett is right in what he says, we'll go to elections. We'll see if he's correct.
So this is just politics. You don't think they have a point, these various political opponents, in saying that this has left Israel in a worse position?
Look, on the one hand, in the public opinion, I know that we've suffered. And we can talk about why Israel suffers in the public relations or public opinion. I'm aware of that. But I'll quote Golda Meir, our third prime minister, female prime minister. And she said that perhaps we'll have to live with condemnations, but at least we'll live and not die. So sometimes you have to suffer condemnations, but you do this in order to protect your people. And that is exactly what Israel is doing. In the final analysis of all of this, Israel will come out stronger because the moderates will be strengthened. Iran, which is the leader of the pack of the extremists, will be weakened. That will open options for peace in the entire Middle East. We mentioned Lebanon, but we can talk about many other countries in the Middle East that will follow the Abraham Accords because they will see the strength of Israel. People make peace with someone who is perceived as strong, not someone who is perceived as weak. If we had continued to receive rockets launched against the northern part of Israel and people dying and having dispersing and displaced, then no one will make peace with such a country. So in the end, final analysis, Israel will come out stronger and more braced for peace with the entire Middle East.
Ambassador Newman, I do appreciate your willingness to have these conversations. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll have more on all this on Insiders Sunday morning. Transport Minister Catherine King will be my guest. Hope you can join us then. And PK will be back in the podcast feed on Monday. Bye for now.
You're making us all feel very excited about being here.